Hello and welcome to SARL Rugby League. After the success of Monday's Zoom video meeting where we discussed Super League and the impacts of coronavirus and whether the game will resume this season, we're going to talk a bit more today about the NRL. We're joined by Trev, our resident Australian expert.
Hey guys.
We're joined by CJ. We're going to discuss a little bit about the women's game. Obviously, CJ is a player for KR Ladies.
Hi everyone.
And we're joined again by Joe Needley, who is very knowledgeable about the championship. Obviously, we touched on it the other day, so we're going to get a bit more of his views on that. First, we're going to talk, and we're going to go into the women's game. Now, I don't think that's really been talked about much in this crisis. We've heard a lot about Super League, but as we mentioned, CJ is a player for KR Ladies and our reporter for the Women's Super League. CJ, what is kind of the feeling around the women's game at the moment? Is there a little bit of anxiousness around?
I think more than anything, the women are frustrated. And the reason being is they're carrying on with their normal training within the government guidelines. So we've all got our PT, strength conditioning coaches and coaches. If their coaches have been furlonged, for an example, full KR's coaches are furlonged, so they cannot train us, because that would mean that they were working. So they've given us the tools for us to go away, and as collectively as a team, we've come together and brought in different little things that we needed to do, as the same for the Women's Super League. So you've got the likes of Lee's, Castleford and that, who are carrying on training, but if their coaches are a paid coach, then they need to be careful within the government guidelines as well. So there's all that going on in the background, but also there's the anxiousness of the fact that will we get to play? We worry that it's all, we want the men to play. Everyone wants the men to play. God, you know, they're the part and parcel of the reason why we're here. So by getting them up and running, well, that means that we'll get up there, but will we be the last? Will we be not necessarily the forgotten, but will we be the last people to get to play? And we've touched on it before. If the lads aren't playing, the lads aren't bringing in the revenue, they're not getting them ticket sales, them gate sales, then, you know, the money that they do give us for us to play our game is not there. That's our worry.
Yeah, well, obviously talk a little bit there about the money now. The RFL have just received a £16 million government loan. Now, do you expect any of that money to filter through to the women's game?
I do, yeah, definitely. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, well, just with that, CJ, sorry to cut you in there, Ben. But just with that, I do expect some of that money to filter into the women's game. And that because everyone needs to remember that the Super League is meant to be on their own and not actually a part of the RFL these days. But if the RFL is going to give them more money to the Super League, well, you know, I think that's wrong on that point. That the Super League also should have applied to the government on their own behalf.
Yeah, well, just on that, Trev, well, what's the thoughts and feelings around the women's game in Australia? Is that season expected to resume, or?
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, up in Queensland, their state women's competition has been cancelled for the year. But in New South Wales, the state competition is meant to resume. But regarding the NRLW, at the moment, there's been no talk about it from the NRL, to be honest.
All right, well, fair enough. Now, I'll just come quickly back to you, CJ. I know a lot of the men have even said, look, we're as much in the dark as everybody else, as much as the supporters. Now, have you heard anything as a player about any signs of when the season could resume?
No, our coaches have been completely and totally honest, and that is for both my coaches. So my head coach in the British Army, my head coach at Hull KR have said exactly the same thing. As soon as we know, we will let you know. But the problem is people speculate, and there's due to rumours. They're just brilliant, that they grow arms and legs. And so they're being very, very strict in the terms of letting us know this is all we know for now. And personally, I think that's probably the best way to go, because if you start surmising or, you know, making up things going on and stuff like that, it makes the girls even more worried and anxious and things like that. So just basically crack on with training, and we'll resume as soon as the government lets us play.
Yeah, so I'll just come quickly on to you now, Trev. Now, the NRL and the Rugby League Players Association have said it's confirmed now the game will restart on, is it the 28th of May?
Yeah, that's right. So 28th of May, and now we're just under 22 days away from the resumption of the league, and they're looking at playing 20 rounds, and grand final date has been confirmed for October 25th.
Right. Is that a move you think is right? Do you feel like that's going to work? I know obviously a few teams are having to relocate, like Melbourne. Do you think it's coming back at the right time, and is it the right amount of games?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I believe they're coming back at the right time. Obviously, the NRL have got some of the best biosecurity and pandemic experts in the world as their advisors. Also, working with the states and federal government here in Australia. People need to remember that when the game is cancelled or suspended, not cancelled, but suspended, that the infection rate at the time was going up, like in cases, was going up just under 25%. And as of when they've made the announcement, when they were looking at resuming, so this was from the 7-week mark, from 7 weeks out, so this is a few weeks ago now, that the infection rate in Australia was only going up by just under 1.5%, and now that curve is even getting smaller. So at the moment, like, I believe they're doing the right thing, and Peter V'landys is a pretty good man who is the chairman of the ARLC. And just with his background, just to let people know, he's also the big boss of horse racing in New South Wales, and he got them through their dark stages a few years ago, and when horse racing was on death's door, when they faced their pandemic with their type of flu for the horses. So he knows what he's doing. He's a smart man.
Right, brilliant. Just on that, obviously there's much uncertainty over here around the Ashes. I think a lot of people are expecting it to be canned. Is that sort of the feeling over there?
I'm sorry about that.
Are you expecting the Ashes to go ahead?
Yeah, no, well, to be honest, we're not expecting the Ashes to go ahead. They're looking at scheduling State of Origin to be at the end of the season, to be played afterwards, and not during the season, just to fill in that gap where the Ashes would have been.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, just quickly come on to you as well, Joe, let you get involved. Now, we skirted along and discussed a little bit about the championship the other day. Now, I think we mentioned that, you know, with a lot of the players being furloughed, a lot of the staff being furloughed, not only by the clubs but in their part-time jobs for many of the teams. And I think it's probably going to work out not better, but it's not going to have such a bad effect on the championship with the players perhaps not earning as much as Super League. So it's a bit better for those clubs to deal with it. Obviously, the only side gig to that is the fact that they're not getting any income through gate sales, basically. Now, have you kind of looked into the championship at all, and what do you expect to happen? Do you think all clubs will manage to stay in existence by the time the season resumes?
Well, you've added several years, in recent years, several clubs have announced their major financial difficulties, and that was before all this. I'd say it's a concern it's a concern away for all clubs, Ben, because I know what you just said there, but you've got your heavier spending championship clubs, like, I don't mean to pick out here, but your Leeds, your Featherstone, your Toulouse, your London. It might affect them a bit more, might it? Because, I mean, they might have spent a bit more because they are constantly trying to get into the Super League, aren't they, as we all well know. And Lee, perhaps, in a way, came undone a couple of years ago when they failed to make the qualifiers, and had to change their entire squad. I just feel, though, that this might undo them as well as other clubs again. Yet again, I don't mean to pick names out here. I don't mean to pick clubs out. The heavier spending championship clubs could be affected. It depends whether they will get a decent share of the 16 million to combat that, because this will be yet another test of whether they've invested everything in their club correctly, Ben. I mean, as for the lesser spending ones, you see, I think a lot of them, they're treating the game like as more of a fun pastime rather than be competitive, if that makes sense, because your Whitehavens, your Oldhams, okay, they want to survive relegation from there to League One. But they, as well as that, they don't spend heavily either, do they? So therefore, they might have they're a bit more used to you know, what's the word, poverty lifestyle, if you could say that fairly, Ben. But yeah, overall, my main concern is the heavier spending championship clubs and whether they've well, because obviously they didn't foresee this coming, but whether they've been prepared for it in the past. You know, because as I mentioned there.
Joe, just ask a question, Joe,
right?
regarding the championship. Like some of those smaller clubs, like obviously they don't spend as much money on their players, on contracts and that, but they do rely on the gate and they do rely on merchandise and they do rely on attendances on match days to obviously cover anything that they may have to pay. So like obviously that must be hurting them like for their long-term gain.
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, it's like I mentioned just there in the chat though, Trev, about how some of the clubs have announced their financial difficulties, haven't they? I mean, I'll go back to Whitehaven, Keighley Cougars as well, just to pick them two out. Yeah, even though they don't get that many fans through the gate, however, it's every little helps, doesn't it? And that has been my concern. And what people seem to realise, well, some people don't realise is, okay, we're going to focus on Super League, because Super League is, you know, your backbone of the British game. But these lesser clubs, they offer, you know, players who can't quite make the cut for Super League, they offer them an alternative, you know, an alternative way of playing, an alternative way of staying in the game, rather than you know, going to what your academy or amateur level, or even having forced into retire early. So we do need these lesser clubs. Now I think focus should be put on them as well as the Super League. Okay, maybe not as much, because, you know, I would say they don't take in as much money, but they still need to survive. They are the backbone of our game, and we do need a mate, Trev. And no doubt, I bet that will be the same for Australia too.
Oh, definitely, mate. So at the moment down here in Australia, okay, so in Queensland and New South Wales, the Canterbury Cup, which is the reserve grade equivalent in New South Wales, and the Intrust Super Cup up in Queensland, both those competitions have been cancelled for this year already. But the thing that surprised a lot of people, especially in New South Wales, the Ron Massey Cup and the Sydney Shield is looking at resuming come July. And that's that competition is still a New South Wales Rugby League based competition, and that's under Canterbury Cup. So quite a few of those players who are contracted to play Canterbury Cup, definitely at some of the clubs, not at all the clubs, but some clubs have, for example, your Blacktown Workers Seagulls, your Mounties. So they got Ron Massey Cup teams, where some of those players, if you're not in the top 30 to Manly or Canberra, I wouldn't be too surprised to watching them run around in the Ron Massey Cup. But some of those other clubs that are in the competition may not be so lucky to have that comfort of, even though they may feed into one of the NRL clubs, but again, they may not have that direct feed, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's similar to Super League then, because the reserve championship was cancelled, wasn't it? And that also can reiterate why we need the championship clubs to survive, because with the reserves, no matter what, not getting any more action this year, they would obviously they'd like to have some time at the championship and League One. Should that hopefully get back underway and everyone survive?
Yeah, and I think Trev's touched on it there, and we touched on it the other day. Look, the season's unlikely over here anyway to get underway within the next month. So, and I think you found that in the NRL, how long have you lost in the NRL, Trev? Is it 1-2 months of the season?
Yeah. So when was it? I went in the hospital around mid-March.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. So the season was suspended on the 23rd or 22nd of March, and we got to see the second round because what happened was the Queensland government, and I touched on this in one of my articles, if you remember, Ben, when the league was first suspended, how they were originally looking at going up to Gladstone up in Queensland, but then when the Queensland government closed their borders, that sort of applied more, in my own opinion, applied a lot of pressure to the NRL to suspend the season so they could reevaluate on what to do.
Yeah, and I think, look, you've lost over there. You've lost 2 months of the season. We're going to lose a lot more than that, and I think.
Oh, you will for sure.
And I think the thing that we need to realise is that it's not just going to be the Super League schedule that's going to change. And I just come back to you on this, CJ, because I know the women's game, obviously, they much like the men's game, they have promotion and relegation currently. We've discussed in Super League whether promotion and relegation should remain. Now, do you think in the women's game that promotion and relegation will stay? Or do you think that the reduced schedule will completely change the format?
So the format already changed this season anyway, in terms of now you fight for the top 4, whereas before it was just everyone was playing. What they're trying to do is what I envisage they're trying to do is trying to get 12 teams into the Women's Super League. And then from there on, you'll have obviously the championship and then the divisions below. They don't have enough teams to be messing around with relegation at the moment.
Yeah.
And the longer... The problem that a lot of coaches have with the women's game as opposed to the men's game is we self-fund. Everyone self-funds. Now, you look at the likes of Castleford, for an example, Tigers ladies. Everyone thinks they've got a big money pot, and they haven't. What they've done is their media manager, a guy called Seb, he has developed that team using his amazing media mind, and he's managed to make them bigger in a short space of time. So instead of having like 200 people come and watch the game, he has nearly 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 from what he's been doing in media. So the money pot that they have is a lot of self-fund. So to us, it's not really affecting us in that sort of way, because if someone said to me, you're going to go play Fev Rovers, I will drive there myself. I don't have a coach. I don't have that. I don't have well, you do sometimes. Like when I play for York City Knights, we would be coached St Helens and to Wigan. But we are predominantly self-funded anyway. So I don't think in terms of like relegations and things like that, there's just no point. We're still building. So they might as well, if they're going to turn around and say, look, there's going to be no season this year, leave it the way it was and we'll start again next year. I don't think they are. I think they're going to allow us to play a few games towards the latter end just to keep us current and competent. But in terms of the league, me personally, I think the league is not going to go ahead as what it would do. I think we're going to get a few games in and that's it.
Well, I think it was Jack or were it you, Joe, that had the idea the other day. Now, in the women's game, they have a Challenge Cup final and a grand final. So do you expect both of them to stay? And do you expect maybe in the Women's Super League they might have a bit of almost like a knockout competition?
There's lots of options. And sorry, you go on.
No, I was just going to say, CJ, I mean, we discussed the other day how the cup competition might even be moved till after the Super League season itself and, just play a couple of knockout games until the final quickly. I mean, I don't know if the women should follow through on that.
It's an option there, and I'm sure there's lots of people at the RFL now, strategically planning as to what they can do to keep this going. I think personally, if they remove the Challenge Cup, they're going to remove a lot of other teams, because there's teams in the Challenge Cup who don't actually play in the Women's Super League, and that gives them an opportunity to play against Women's Super League teams so that we can identify potential England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland players as well. So if we remove the Challenge Cup, you're moving that opportunity for other women for the 2021 World Cup.
And not just the World Cup, just potential players that can be brought into a system for a Women's Super League or a Women Champion League team, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they need to get away from this. There's this weird sense of if you play in the Women's Super League, you're gonna have more scope of playing in for your rep rugby. That's not true. I know one player she was selected for the Knights, and she's looking at an England place, and she's never played in the Women's Super League. And that's where a lot of people have got it wrong. Just because you play in the Women's Super League doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to play, for England or Scotland or wherever. So we need to keep these other competitions going for that potential for the 2021. And that's what our aim is at the moment, is keeping it current and competent for the 2021.
Yeah, I'll just come back to you, Trev, final word now. I think we're all excited to have some sport return, and I know a lot of people over here will be watching the NRL very much in depth, and I'll certainly be trying to watch every game because I've missed my rugby league now. Do you expect the season to stay? Because I know in a few countries they've actually they've gone back to sporting events and they've been cancelled again. I think it's a few countries in Europe, a few football leagues. Now, do you think that's it for the NRL? Do you think it's going to start and you think it's going to finish, or do you think there's maybe just a little bit of a chance that we could break off again if cases rise?
Yeah, so at the moment, if everything stays the way it is, the games will just go ahead without an issue. But if we have another big breakout of the coronavirus down here in Australia and infection rates go back up again to where they once were, well, obviously then they will cancel. Obviously, sorry about that. Just had something pop up on the screen. They'll cancel or look at suspending the season. But overall, mate, if everything stays the way it is, the season should get through without any issues.
Right, brilliant. Well, we hope that's the case over here. We're hoping to get both the men's and women's game back underway. I think, because first and foremost, the safety and the health of everyone takes precedence over everything. And I mean, with us having the highest number of cases in Europe, it's obviously it's going to be really. It's hard to say whether we're going to just give sport an option to uplift people in this country, and whether we can get it back underway behind closed doors like football can. But I think a lot of people have their doubts about that. But we can only wait and see. But I think it's kind of. What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, just with that though, like this is a big opportunity for rugby league, and that because I know before the suspension happened originally, like rugby league was like the only sport being played in the world, and it had like we're finally hitting markets like over in the United States, and they started to have a good proper look at rugby league. So this is a good time for rugby league to take a stranglehold on the, and I hate to say it, on the less fortunate of other sports that aren't playing.
I get where you're coming from there, Trev, but I mean, like we're saying, it's government guidelines. We've got to be quite stringent.
Oh, definitely.
But the thing that makes me laugh, and it doesn't make me laugh at all, but when people go on about us having these high infection rates, now if we look at the size of our country and the amount of people in it, you know, we've got to look at the ratios of it as well. And the UK is quite small, yet we've got a lot of people in there. So, I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm far from it, but I know that would cause more of a problem if you lived in quite a vast area with limited people. So, you know, we have to be that little bit more stringent. And, you know, none of us are politicians, we can't comment on it. But I just think that I miss rugby so much. I miss playing. I miss, playing without a shadow of a doubt. But I also know that, you know, health is first and foremost. But we need to be able to make sure that we can save our sport at the same time. It's a catch-22.
100%, and I totally agree there. Like, you know, like you look at Australia. Australia's the size of Europe, but the population's only 25 million people. You know what I mean? So, like, obviously, like compared to like you guys over there in the UK, like very small compared to Australia, and like your population is like way bit more than what we are here.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think Super League kind of did jump on that. I think we were probably the last major sport over here that did actually suspend action, because I think we were trying to look in for that window of opportunity. And I think it was that final Super League game before the season was actually suspended between Castleford and Saints. Got record viewing figures because there were no other sport on. But then I think it just came to the point where like, whoa, this is bigger than sport.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, I think I'm sure I'm not the only one, and CJ's touched on it there. I think we all just want sport back, and it's good to get a bit of an insight there into the women's game and how they're kind of dealing with it as it is with the NRL and with the championship with you, Joe. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. Especially a shout out as well to Trev. I mean, what time is it over there now, Trev?
What's the time there? And I'll let you know.
It's 1:36 p.m.
Yeah, so it's just after 10:30 here at night.
Oh, I thought we were a lot later than that. Maybe not as big a credit as I was going to give then. And shout out to CJ for joining us after work.
I do actually move, just letting people know I do actually move. It's just the technicality in terms of that's why my photo's like that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That's a good side.
Yeah.
On that note, guys, I think we'll draw it to a close. Cheers for joining us, and we'll be back with more of these videos later this week. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.